The best witness of any homicide is the body. That's where you start. That's what's going to really tell you the story.
Finally, some answers in the puzzling case out of Kansas City, where 3 Chiefs fans went outside after a big game and never came inside. A newly released toxicology report is shedding new light on what may have happened, with reports of cocaine and fentanyl in the men's systems.
They like to party, so to speak. They like to drink, and they probably got some cocaine that had fentanyl in it.
The event leaving behind just one sole survivor who was handcuffed after the bodies were found. Could he now face charges?
Bro, what is going on right now? What is going on right now?
It's been nearly 1 month since 3 Kansas City Chiefs fans were found dead outside of a home on the city's north side. Since then, we've seen widespread coverage of the mysterious case with few answers.
Kansas City Chiefs, they're in the Super Bowl. So, and along with the Swift and Kelsey, their relationship, anything will engage with the Kansas City Chiefs is going to be hitting the news.
That was retired FBI agent Colin Schmidt, who says there's a lot of reasons why the case has stayed in the headlines, but there may soon be more answers.
The fact that it was just such a horrible circumstance where 3 people were found outside, basically frozen to death. But I think as they drive in, they probably didn't freeze to death. They probably died of a drug overdose.
Here's what we do know. On January 7th, the Kansas City Chiefs took on the Los Angeles Chargers for the last game of the regular season. That night, Jordan Willis held a viewing party at his rental home in KC. At the get-together, 38-year-old Ricky Johnson, 37-year-old David Harrington, and 36-year-old Clayton McGeeney. All 3 men went to high school together, and so did Alex Weimer-Lee, who made an appearance at the watch party. The Chiefs bested the Chargers 13-12, but the Friends party carried on well after the game. Weimer-Lee reported he left the rest of the group at about midnight, saying they were still up and watching Jeopardy! It was 2 days later, on January 9th, when McGeeney's fiancée found his body in the backyard of Willis's rental home. The bodies of Johnson and Harrington were also recovered. Weeks later, local Kansas City stations report toxicology results have been completed and handed over to police. We're seeing reports that the toxicology report has been completed, it's been handed over to police, and even some of the victims' families have received the tox report or at least learned what's inside of it. We haven't seen it publicly. It hasn't completely been released, and I'm wondering why not?
Well, I think they're still trying to determine cause of death, and then basically there might have to be an autopsy to determine if there was another factor that caused the deaths of these 3. I don't know if they did an autopsy when they recovered the victims. They did say in the article that you sent me that it was 30 degrees outside, and they were found dead. I don't recall if they were found in the snow or not, but generally speaking, 30-degree weather, you're going to be able to kind of save yourself, so to speak. Now, if it was 30 below, or what I used to deal with in Wisconsin, when you have that wind going, yeah, you could freeze to death very quickly if you weren't dressed appropriately. But in this case, they would have survived for quite some time in with that temperature. So it really comes back to answer your question, why are they not being specific about a cause of death? I think they want to make sure they have their ducks in a row, because if it turns out that it was a fentanyl overdose, for example, they don't want to tip off whoever gave them the drugs, and also they want to be prepared to make some arrests.
High-speed chases,
We got a
unruly suspects,
I will kill that mother.
Tase me?
No.
Do it.
Stay in the blue box.
I like it kinky.
dramatic DUIs,
I'm gonna pass everything that she's trying to do.
and shocking body cam footage.
Hey, get on the ground! Get on the ground!
Law and Crime presents Body Cam, the place for real, raw, and wild police videos.
You should have seen it. It was good. It's on body camera. I'll show it to you.
Catch the action and subscribe to our new YouTube channel now.
So far, Kansas City police have been very outspoken, saying they do not suspect foul play. In fact, the only survivor of the night, Jordan Willis, was not arrested or charged. Police say he's not even a suspect. Willis's attorney says he passed out after the game on January 7th and didn't wake up until the bodies were recovered on January 9th. He allegedly answered the door in his underwear with a wine glass. After that, he was put in handcuffs, and the entire interaction was caught on video by Willis's neighbor.
Bro, what is going on right now? What is going on right now? Dude, domestic violence is crazy. Yo, everybody be nice to one another. Come on now.
Is there any reason why he would be taken into custody or detained rather right away, but then not face charges?
Well, I think the cops were, reacting to very imperfect information. I mean, they just got 3 dead people in a yard, and the only survivors there. The first thing they're going to do is they're going to take actions to protect their own safety, which may have been the reason why they handcuffed him, or they got information from an informant or somebody called in or whatever that he was a culpable to this. And at that point, the cops did what cops do, is they basically are going to detain him and question him. And then as the information comes out, the U.S. Attorney or the DA's office might have said, well, we don't have enough necessarily right now to charge him. Why don't we just take a step back and continue to gather information?
That new information comes in the way of a toxicology report. Let's talk about drugs here, because that is something a lot of people have been speculating about really since this case began. And now we're seeing reports that there were substances in some of the victims' systems. Some are saying cocaine and fentanyl, and that's a big one a lot of people are pointing out, a potential fentanyl overdose. What do you make of that?
Well, I had a case very at the tail end of my career of a fentanyl of a cocaine laced party drug, and the victims had no idea there was fentanyl in it, nor did they want fentanyl, obviously. And they all ingested this, and out of the 6 people that ingested it, all 4 died and 2 went to the hospital, or 2 survived. So one thing about fentanyl is if you're opioid tolerant, there's a possibility that you would survive if the cocaine was laced with fentanyl. But it appears to me that these 3 were not heroin addicts. They liked to party, so to speak. They liked to drink, and they probably got some cocaine that had fentanyl in it. And so the next step is who gave them the cocaine, or that was particularly laced, and that's the person they're going to hold accountable.
All this adds up with our first report on the case, when we sat down with forensic death investigator Joseph Scott Morgan.
I have to think of something that is going to drive down your neurological responses to the point where you're almost in a comatose state at that point in time. Well, what could facilitate that? At the top of my list are going to be opioids or perhaps some kind of synthetic opioid.
Morgan pointed out Willis may have had the same drugs in his system.
As to Mr. Willis, here's one of the problems we're going to encounter if we're trying to correlate the happenings in the backyard with this 48-hour gap for him.
Some reports say Alex Weimer-Lee, the other friend at the party, made a few texts that night about drugs. Other reports say witnesses saw some friends carrying multiple 30 packs of beer when headed to the party. So far, we don't know what Willis had in his system that night, but Schmidt says it's a high probability he also had some fentanyl. In your experience with any fentanyl overdoses, could it cause somebody to pass out for 48 hours? The person I'm referring to in this case is Jordan Willis. He's the man who was renting the house where this entire party happened. He survived and he's alive, but he says that he has missing 48 hours. Is it possible that he too took whatever could have been laced with this fentanyl, let's say?
Yes, and that basically, when I saw that, because that happened in the case that I investigated, one of the survivors slept or was passed out for about 2 days, and he woke up. He saw his 2 friends were deceased. So he basically was in an opioid overdose state, but he was also a user of heroin, so he was able to survive the amount of fentanyl that he ingested. So when I saw that, I'm thinking they all ingested the same batch, and he was just the only one that survived.
According to weather.com, the low in Kansas City on January 7th was 32 degrees. The next day saw a low of 31, and the day the bodies were found had a low of 15 degrees. That means it was likely Willis's placement inside the house saved his life. Perhaps if he was overdosing and he was out for those 48 hours, what was his saving grace, so to speak, is that he was indoors and these other people were outside where the elements could kind of get to him. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the temperature saved him. The other three, because it was 30 degrees, the body has to conserve energy. So it's either going to, it has to put its energy somewhere. But if it's in an overdose state, the body obviously can't react or can't help that person survive. So the other person, he was laying warm and cozy in his bed or in his living room or wherever he was passed out, while these other three were basically outside in the elements. And being that it was quote unquote 30 degrees, that doesn't take into account what the wind was doing. So that temperature might have been much, much lower.
Willis has reportedly moved out of the rental home and, according to his parents, checked himself into rehab for substance abuse.
I mean, it's obvious, yeah, that he was a drug user. They need to do some sort of toxicology on him as well. I'm sure they already have, and likely will do a hair analysis, because the drugs will stay longer in your hair versus in your blood or in your bodily fluids. And most importantly, they need to sit him down and say, okay, where'd you get the drugs? Did you give it? And even more importantly, did you give it to him? Because if he gave it to him, then he's going to be culpable for their deaths.
According to the Missouri Department of Health and Senior Services, drug overdoses are the #1 leading cause of death in adults ages 18 to 44 in the state of Missouri. 70% of those overdoses come from opioids like fentanyl. If investigators determine Willis did distribute these deadly drugs, he could face serious prison time. What would it take for charges to be filed in this case?
If he gave them the cocaine under federal law, he's basically, it's strict liability. He's liable for any harm that occurred to them. So generally speaking, it's a 15-year mandatory minimum in the federal system. And here in Riverside County, where I'm at, the DA is starting to charge people who are responsible for fentanyl overdoses with manslaughter with some add-ons. So the criminal justice system in the United States is finally catching up to this fentanyl overdose problem and starting to hold people accountable who give the drugs unknowingly, even if it's unknowingly, to these people. If the guy that didn't know there was fentanyl in there, didn't have any intent. Obviously, it doesn't appear that he wanted to kill his friends, but under federal law, it doesn't matter. He gave him something, a drug, an illegal drug that harmed them, then he's responsible.
How will investigators track down who is the source of these drugs?
And more phones. So they're going to question him. He may say that the decedent number 2 is the one who actually passed the drugs out to everybody. They're going to get that gentleman's phone. They're going to, in the words of a criminal investigator, rip it. Download the what's going on in that phone. Look at those text messages. And then it's been my experience that drug dealers, especially if they're not very sophisticated and they're basically at the user level, they're going to put some text messages or something in there that indicate that they're the ones that gave them the drugs.
So what would it take to track down whoever distributed these drugs?
Well, generally speaking, this is what a forensic pathologist would kind of come in and talk to. But basically, the toxicology report is only half the story. You also, generally speaking, you have to actually do the autopsy and determine what the lungs look like, because when you do overdose on fentanyl, your lungs will fill up with fluid, and essentially you're going to you suffocate along with a lot of other things. Your body, your organs are shutting down, and a lot of other things. And so, a forensic pathologist would be able, with the toxicology report, look at the internal organs and show that there's indicia of a drug overdose.
Still, the case leaves behind many unanswered questions, like why Clayton McGeeney's fiance broke into the rental home multiple days after she last spoke with him. If she tracked his phone to the location, why didn't she find him earlier? Schmidt says there could be an easy explainer for this one.
Well, I think she felt there was some foul play afoot, so to speak, and she was obviously freaking out. She also probably was reacting to her fiance's background or his behaviors in the past. So, and based upon maybe the people he hangs around with, his pattern of life, his party habits.
But what's more difficult to explain, what really happened that night? Schmidt says that answer lies with Harrington, Johnson, and McGeaney.
I mean, the toxicology, the best witness of any homicide is the body. That's where you start. That's what's going to really tell you the story, and then you go back from there.
We reached out to family members of all three men to hear their perspectives, but have not yet heard back. We do know the results of the toxicology report have been shared with family, but so far, autopsy results have not been completed. Reporting for Law&Crime, I'm Gillespie.